Hello, my name is Yasker John Goom and I struggle from CEVD, that is chronic European vehicle disorder. Ever since I was the age of 15 years old, I have been sexually attracted to European vehicles, specifically from the 90s and 2000s era. What that looks like in my day-to-day life is terrible money management. I've always got no cash to eat or do anything except for put parts into my vehicles, and it gets really hard. It's something I've struggled with for a long time, and hopefully today you guys can make a donation to the Goom Foundation and hopefully give me some proper help, because this is really struggling and help affecting my day-to-day life. I need help, so if you could please send donations to www.thegoomfoundation.com. Any donations, even small, would be much appreciated. Thank you for your time. Welcome back. Today we're working on the infamous 1998 BMW 540i, and what we're working on today is getting the supercharger plumbed and ready to go. So a little backstory for you guys that haven't been following. This is my 98 540i. I've restored this car numerous times, probably 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 or however many times I can remember. So what we're doing today is we're mounting this Vortec V2 supercharger on this car. And for those 540 nerds out there like myself, this being a 98, it's a non-Vanos, meaning it's a single variable valve timing M62 B44. And with that said, this Dinan kit that I have for it now is designed for the 1999 to 2003, more commonly found M62 TU 540i. So what that means is this kit will bolt up directly to this non-Vanos application, but there are quite a few differences and hurdles that I've had to overcome to get this fit the kit. Bolting this kit up is pretty straightforward. It's all the AC brackets and the main brackets and everything bolt completely where they're supposed to between the non-Vanos and the Vanos, but a few key differences are, number one, this charge pipe over here will not fit between both applications. Reason being is the throttle bodies on the non-Vanos only come up to here, and the non-Vanos throttle body has the assisted stability control throttle flap that brings it out 90 degrees, and that cuts off your charge pipe. So to get around that initially, I thought, okay, let me just cut the charge pipe where it would meet the original Vanos unit since it comes out farther. And to my surprise, that didn't work at all. The angle was a lot higher than it was supposed to be. So what I had to do was actually come down here, make a cut down here at this line, which was already existing weld, and swivel this unit a little bit that way, and then make another cut towards the bottom and angle the pipe completely that way. So now this pipe is bolted up. I even added another bracket where it bolts to the supercharger, so it's so solid you can shake the whole car with it, so that's not going anywhere. Hurdle number 2 is now plumbing this idle control valve to the supercharger system, because idle control valve does what it says. It keeps the idle stable, and if there's any linearity differences between the idle, that'll kind of correct it and get everything idling properly. So you've got 2 options. Either somehow find yourself a coupler that's got a plumbed port for this idle control valve, which I don't like the idea of, because the idle control valve having a little hole here is just going to cause a boost issue or a vacuum issue. So I came up with the idea to weld a steel bung to the actual charge pipe and then extend this pipe over so that the idle control valve can plumb. And the next thing that we've got to hurdle is this charge pipe. We're having to go back and fabricate a lot of these pieces because this kit is older than Cole's grandparents. There's no like pieces you can buy from Dinan, and their customer service is kind of iffy, so they're not necessarily going to sell you any parts even if you've got their existing kit. So what that means for us is we've got to fabricate all of this stuff alone. So one of the things we're going to be working on in this episode is getting this 3.5-inch intake connected to our MAF sensor so we can have an actual intake so we can drive this thing around. And next we'll go over what we're going to do for tuning solutions, fueling, E85, possibly injectors, CCV delete plate, and all those other things. So keep watching and we'll bore you with all of these details on our 540i build while Cole zooms into my lips. Happening here. We have a pipe 3.5 inches, right? We got to cut this and make some sort of 90-degree angle to fit this Dinan 4-inch MAF sensor and then make it work for the intake. So we're going to use this mighty miter saw I found in my basement, and we're going to pretend it works firsthand. And then second of all, we're going to pretend that that red blade is for metal and not for wood. And if it explodes, we're going to blame it on Cole. If I do the math and carry the one just right about All right, so for all of you people who weld aluminum and know anything about aluminum, you should never use any components that you weld steel, or any wire brushes or anything that touches steel is a big no-no for aluminum. So naturally, we're gonna take this 1900s rusty file that's probably touched aluminum and God knows what, and we're gonna file this aluminum just to really get those burr edges down. My initial idea here was to cut this 90-degree 3.5-inch pipe, have a, I think that's a 45, I'm gonna pretend I know my angles and call that a 45, although it probably isn't. I was going to have that connect to this 3.5 to 4-inch coupler to then go to this 4-inch MAF housing. Long story short, that is way too much stuff going on down there in that little tiny angle of a hole. So what we are now thinking instead is we're going to mount this 3.5 to 4-inch coupler here, mount this 4-inch pipe underneath so that it can go down, and then we're going to pull this bumper off to see where we have to cut so that we can fit both our MAF sensor and our air filter to be plumbed with air intake from that fog light cover like the stock Dinan kit calls for anyways. So here's what we're going to do. I'm going to bolt all of this down so it's not swiveling, and then we'll make a line of where we need to cut and go from there. Right, so now we're gonna go ahead and clamp everything together temporarily so that when we make our line, if that's what you want to call it, to make our cut, everything isn't swiveling around and doesn't fit at the end of the day. All right, viewers, so in my negligence to measure things properly and hope things are just gonna work, we've had some success here. So I cut this 3.5-inch pipe and angled it to where about we need it, and Cole was like, why don't you try to fit in this 4-inch pipe at the bottom? And I did that and it ended up working. So props to Cole. So now, if you join us here at the bottom, the whole idea of this intake is it's supposed to come down and make a 90-degree angle downwards here, and then your air filter and your MAF sensor are supposed to sit somewhere down here, but not super low because remember the bumper only comes to about here. So now we're gonna make a cut here, and then we're gonna have to get some more piping and probably make a weld and then bring it over this way and probably angle it more towards the radiator a little bit. But we have more of an intake solution than we've had ever for this car, so progress, progress. So viewers, this is a pair of cutting pliers for an electrician. I'm not an electrician, but everybody's got loads at their disposal, thank God. Unless you live in Baghdad or somewhere that doesn't have internet. So I looked it up, and you could use these cutting pliers if you cut them right here at the top. This little tiny notch in there you can use to bead roll your pipes. So you just want to come in here, and we're gonna hope that works. Hopefully it does. If it doesn't, it'll feel really retarded. And the basic principle here is you just have to create yourself a lip, because when these components are under boost or pressure, it's easy for them to blow off. So basically all you're gonna do is continue that line going all the way around the pipe, so that if there's anything vibrating or causing the pipe to want to slip off, this little tiny lip is gonna hold it from coming off with your hose clamp. Very important to have your parts bead rolled professionally, but considering we're not professional, it's gonna have to work. All right, so here sitting next to us is this ginormous money pit of a vehicle known as an E39 540i. And today we're going to talk about, why am I making this like a formal? Who gives a shit? Basically, this is what it takes to supercharge your 540i. So what we've got here is a 98 non-Vanos, as I've said before, and we're going to be running a Dinan supercharger kit. And honestly, at this point, the only part that's Dinan about it is really the bracketry. The main bracket holding the blower, the cross brace to the back, and then of course the pulley, which are all very important pieces because none of those things can be found or are very hard to be made aftermarket to fit this to this car. So with that Dinan hardware, next thing we've got to take into consideration is the fueling. So we've got a couple options here. Number one, we could run E85. E85 is great for boosted applications. You can pick up a significant amount of torque and wheel horsepower just off of running ethanol over pump gas. However, one issue with running ethanol in this car is this ECU. This car has the Bosch ME 5.21 ECU, and for all you B&W nerds that know, it is one of the hardest ECUs to tune on this platform whatsoever. It's very unforgiving, it's very hard to flash, and no basic tuner is gonna know how to tune a car like this without messing it up. Running ethanol, running boost, or any sort of tuning whatsoever on this car is extremely difficult. So Fortunately, someone on the E39 540i exclusive group has shared with me one of his tunes. His name is Joshua. Shout out to him if you're watching this video. So he helped me out because I didn't know what else to do to tune this car. So even with that said, it's going to be very hard to get this car reflashed with this proper fueling that I want to run for my supercharger. So basically, either we need to run his injectors, which I believe are 30-pound injectors, which can be found in the Mustang Cobra, bolt those up to this car. He's actually running a stock fuel pump, stock fuel pressure regulator, so we could use that tune on that stock fueling and run this car at about 5-6-ish PSI at the supercharger and make a good amount of power. Otherwise, another option would be to run a standalone ECU and completely change the ECU, delete the EWS, which is the immobilizer. And with the standalone ECU, you've got all the tuning capabilities in the world. You can turn the boost up as high as you'd like that the motor can handle, of course. It is still a aluminum block without forged internals, so you don't want to turn it up super high. So you can turn up your boost how you want, turn up your fueling, run ethanol, run meth injection. All of those are all things you get to tune with the standalone ECU. It really opens that door for you. As far as the differential goes, let's talk about that. So with this base tune, we're still going to be running 350 to 390-ish wheel horsepower, I believe. So any of that power is going to be pretty hard to put down on the rear wheels, especially with an open differential, because it's just going to be a one-tire fire. What I'm thinking for plans with the differential is I'm going to try to source myself a E39 M5 limited slip differential if possible, but those are kind of hard to find because not a lot of people are parting on M5s as much as they part out 540. So option one is an M5 LSD, 3.15 ratio. It'll give it a little bit more power and torque low end, but it will suffer a little bit on the top end. So M5 LSD, rebuild the clutches, swap the 540 prop shafts, and it should bolt up, and M5 drive shaft as well. Otherwise, another option would probably be to get a wave track LSD, which is completely aftermarket. From there, you can customize your diff ratio from 2.81 to the stock all the way to like 3.93. So you've got a huge window of differential ratios to do with the wave track. There's also M Factory, which is another brand, but I'm not too familiar with them, and not a lot of E39 guys run those that I know of. So I'd probably stick with a wave track or an M5 LSD. Let's talk about what we'll do for the clutch setup. So this clutch is very tired. It's currently slipping at its own power. At 30% throttle, this clutch can no longer handle its own. What we're gonna go with is a UUC lightweight flywheel with its organic pressure plate and clutch setup, which can hold, I believe, 500 foot-pounds of torque, their website says, which will be a good amount, a little bit more than I need for the supercharger, so that'll be a perfect clutch setup for this car. As far as shifting components goes, anybody who's driven a 1990s or 2000s BMW or 2000s Audi for that matter knows that shifting these vehicles feels like playing with a throbbing cock. Like the shifter is very bad, the shifter bushings are completely loose, the thing's flopping all around the place. In order to do that, it'd be better not to only upgrade the shifting components with stock shifter bushings. I would say go as far as upgrade the shifter rod to a UUC single piece aluminum to get rid of some of that slack, and then upgrade with nylon bushings. It'll add a little bit of notch, the shifter might be a little bit tougher than you're used to, but there's gonna be non-existent play compared to the stock shifter setup, which is ridiculous. So that's what we're gonna do for the shifter. As far as boost goes, I'm thinking of running a 3.25 reduction pulley for the Vortec V2. And within that Vortec V2, it's also got rebuilt bearings, brand new bearings, brand new seals, and it's got a billet compressor wheel, which is more efficient. With the reduction pulley, with more PSI, this car should make a pretty good amount of power. So that's basically what's gonna be for the general setup of the car. Of course, braking is very important as well. So for that, we're gonna go with F30 M3, brake calipers in the front. I found a way to fit them up to the E39, and I will make a pretty thorough video on how to bolt those up and what it takes to bolt one of these up to an E39 in the near future. And I could bore you for several hours about what exact component is gonna go on this car, but just know it's gonna be fast, it's gonna be more power, baby. It's gonna be faster than Cole's Honda. Anything you'd like to know about the setup, Cole, that the viewers might ask?
Is the driver single?
For the right price, you know what I'm saying? This is how it's done. Thank you for watching. Roy.